Hello, students and grown-ups. I just wanted to come on here and read a book to you about someone very important in our history that recently passed away on Friday. And so I'm going to read and just teach you a little bit about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And she was the second woman on the Supreme Court. And we'll talk about the Supreme Court a little bit later in the year, but she was just a huge role model and super important to our history. And with her recently passing, I wanted to take the time to make this video for you. My grandparents actually bought us this book, and I think my grandparents love books more than I do, and you know how much I do, so just think about how much more they do. And so when my grandpa had bought me this book a few weeks ago, I was already really excited to be able to teach you about her, and with her passing, I just thought it was a perfect opportunity to go ahead and read this book with you. So this is called Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the Case of RBG versus Inequality. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, during this trial you will learn about a little girl who had no clue just how important she would become. You will see the unfair world she was born into, where boys were valued more than girls, where women were not encouraged to achieve and aspire. You will see evidence that is unfair, just as she herself saw it in her life. Here are the facts of her case. Ruth Bader was born on March 15, 1933, the daughter of two Jewish parents whose family had fled Europe for Brooklyn to escape the anti-Jewish persecution. Her father owned a fur shop for many years, and when the shop went out of business, he got a job at a clothing store. He was uneducated, and he never finished high school. Ruth's mother graduated from high school at the age of 15. She was so smart enough that she might have gone to college. But at this point in history, girls were discouraged from going to college. So Ruth's mother got a job to help pay for her brother's education. Next came marriage, and a husband who discouraged her from working outside the home. Like many men at this time, he thought that a woman's place was in the home. This is what Ruth saw as a girl. What Ruth also saw was a mother who loved books and loved to read, and a mother who wanted her daughter to have a good education that she herself had been denied. Ruth saw a mother who saved every penny so that she could work and that her daughter could go to college someday. Once a week, Ruth's mother would drop her off at the local library, which was above a Chinese restaurant, and left her there while she went and got her hair done. Surrounded by books and the smell of Chinese food, Ruth would choose 3 books to take home that week. She liked books about mythology and Nancy Drew mysteries. I'm going to show you the picture first on this one. So there is a sign that says no dogs and no Jews allowed. So it says, this happened in Brooklyn, which had been the long home to Jewish families and businesses. Brooklyn had also been the home to anti-Jewish violence and vandalism. During the 1930s and 40s, to be Jewish in America was known as anti-Semitism. We now offer into evidence anti-Semitism, experienced firsthand by Ruth. A sign outside a resort in Pennsylvania, seen from her parents' car. It said, no dogs or Jews allowed. This happened right here in America. Being smart can be a great defense for such meanness, and Ruth was one smart cookie. She tried her hardest to get good grades in her early elementary school, where she wrote an essay about Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights called Landmarks of Constitutional Freedom. evidence of an early interest in law and justice in words. This was not to say that she didn't have other interests and hobbies. In high school, Ruth had many, editing the school newspaper, playing the cello, and even twirling a baton at football games, once chipping a tooth in the process. The day on which Ruth would graduate high school with honors promised to be a glorious day. She ranked 6 out of 700 students, and she won a New York State scholarship for college. But Ruth was nowhere to be seen at the ceremony. That's because she stayed home. Ruth's mother had been ill with cancer for 4 years, and on that day that Ruth was supposed to graduate, her mother had died. Instead of wearing a cap and gown of being honored, Ruth was mourning the death of the person that she loved most in the world. The person whose dream was to see Ruth go to college and become an independent woman. There was only one thing for Ruth to do. Suitcase in hand, she arrived at Cornell University, the same university her mother's brother had gone to, and the same university her mom would have gone to if she was encouraged. It was 1950, and very few girls went to college. At Cornell, male students outnumbered female students 4-1. For a girl to get into Cornell, she had to be very smart. But she had to pretend not to be smart if she wanted a boy to ask her on a date. She could not be seen studying. There was a problem for Ruth because she was a very serious student. Her solution was to do her studying in the bathroom where no boys would see her. That's just how things were. And then came Martin Ginsburg. Martin was different than any boy she had ever met. He liked that she had a brain. Ruth was different from any girl he had met. She had dreams of a career and being independent. She spoke only when she had something interesting to say. She was always listening, always thinking, and always learning. In her constitutional law class, Ruth learned about freedom of speech and freedom of the press, freedom all Americans were guaranteed in the Constitution. She learned about a senator named Joseph McCarthy who was trying to take away these important rights, and brave lawyers who were fighting him in court. Learning about these lawyers made Ruth want to become one. She believed she'd be a good lawyer and support herself. But the decision to become a lawyer was not an easy one for a woman to make in 1954. There were very few female lawyers in America. Ruth's own father discouraged her from going to law school because he believed she wouldn't get a job. Ruth refused to listen to her father. She saw no reason why she could not become a lawyer. She was just as smart and capable as any man. With her verdict final, she decided to go to law school. But first, she would get married to her one and only love, Martin Ginsburg. And now, boys and girls of the jury, we offer into evidence some of the most outrageous nonsense Ruth endured before, during, and after law school. Exhibit A. It was her first job out of college, right before law school. Her boss demoted her and cut her wages because she was pregnant. This was a common practice. What could Ruth do? Exhibit B. Arriving at Harvard Law School, where there were only 9 women and 491 men. Harvard did not even have a place for the women to live. It was not very welcoming. Exhibit C. In the law library, she was barred from entering the periodical room because she was a woman. The guard would not let her in, nor would help her anyway. She needed a book from this room. How was she supposed to complete her assignment? Exhibit D. Most classes just had one woman in the class. For comic relief, the professor in the lecture hall would often call on the one woman, such as Ruth, as if it were a joke. But the woman answered almost always correctly. She had to. She was representing all women. Exhibit D. One night, the law school dean invited all 9 female students, including Ruth, to dinner at his house. He sat each woman next to a male law professor, and then went around the table asking the female students why she thought she deserved a spot in law school that could have gone to a man. Ruth simply answered, "To better understand the work of my husband." And yet, without Ruth's help, her husband, who was also a student at Harvard Law School, would not have graduated. He became gravely ill and unable to attend classes. Ruth went to class for him, took notes so that he could pass his courses. She also took care of him, took care of their newborn baby Jane, went to her own classes, and was the editor of Harvard Law Review. Martin recovered and graduated and got a job at a law firm in New York City. Ruth transferred from Harvard Law School to Columbia Law School in New York and tied for first class in the class that she graduated. Surely Ruth would get a job, right? But at Columbia's Job Placement Center, most job postings said men only. Exhibit F. Even among the law firms supposedly open to hiring a woman, not one would hire her because she was a woman, she was Jewish, and she was a mother. Ruth would shrug and move on, first to a job as a law clerk, then a law professor, only to encounter unfairness again and again. At the university that she worked at, she found out that the female professors were being paid less than male professors. She and the other woman sued the school and won. Exhibit H. Ruth would often speak up at the faculty meetings, and the male professors would totally ignore her. A male professor would then say the same thing that Ruth had said and get acknowledged for being so smart. This kept happening even after Ruth became the first tenured female law professor. By the 1970s, a lot of women had had enough of this sort of treatment. They took part in protests and demonstrations with signs saying enough is enough, equal pay for equal jobs, women's liberation, and equality. It wasn't Ruth's style to partake in protest, but she did want to do something. An organization called the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, asked Ruth to be in charge of the court case involving women's inequality. The reason they had asked her? Because she was a woman, and they thought this was women's work. There was no end to the disrespect. Nonetheless, Ruth accepted the position, and in 1972 she became the leader of the ACLU Women's Rights Project, a battle in the court against unfairness to women. She led the lawyer of 6 Supreme Court cases, and she won 5 of them. Though Ruth herself was not a revolutionary, what she did for women was she won the right for women to get equal protection under the law, to be treated equal to men. Ruth had become a lawyer not to change the world. She had become a lawyer because she knew that she had the words and was smart enough to handle the job as well as any man. But here she was, the most important female lawyer in America, fighting and winning legal battles for all American women. Here she was, changing the world. That's why in 1980 she was chosen by President Jimmy Carter to be on the judge for one of the most important courts of law in America besides the Supreme Court, the U.S. Court of Appeals. She was only the second woman in history to serve on this court. Now it was her job to make judgments, to judge what was and wasn't legal. A good judge listens closely, chooses words carefully, values fairness above all else. This job suited Ruth perfectly. After 13 years of being a judge, at the age of 60, Ruth got a phone call one night. It was from President Bill Clinton. He wanted to appoint her to the Supreme Court, to be the second female Supreme Court justice in history. As a girl, Ruth never dreamt that she would be a lawyer or a judge, much less a Supreme Court justice. In her acceptance speech, she spoke of her mother. I pray that I may be all that she would have been if she lived in a time where women could aspire and achieve, and daughters are cherished as much as sons. When Ruth arrived on the court, the first female Supreme Court Justice, Sandra Day O'Connor, was still serving. When Sandra retired, Ruth was the only woman on the Supreme Court for a few years. She was tiny and outnumbered, and yet what she brought to the court was enormous: dignity, civil, intelligence, and soft-spoken manner. She also brought some of the most powerful, strongly worded dissents in the Supreme Court history. A dissent is when a Supreme Court justice disagrees with the opinion of the majority of the 9 judges. In Ruth's case, a dissent often involves a written statement, perfectly worded, that rips the opinion of the majority. Physical toughness is another trademark of Ruth's. In 2009, she found out that she had cancer and needed surgery. Only 19 days after her operation, she returned to the court. She did so because she wanted the people, especially young women, to see at least one woman on the Supreme Court. At any number of points in her life, Ruth could have given up. She could have listened to her father, she could have dropped out of law school, she could have abandoned her search for a job, she could have accepted being paid less than her male associates. Instead, she stayed on the difficult path that she chose for herself, removing one obstacle after the next, until she arrived at the very court that is the symbol of justice in America. There could just be one verdict. Because she did not give up, because she refused to let other people define her limitations as a person, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has herself become a symbol of justice in America. Alright, so that is the end of the story. I'm going to read you the author's note. So it says, Ruth Joan Bader Ginsburg was born in Brooklyn, New York on March 15, 1933. She became a lawyer not to promote women's rights, but simply because she thought she could do the lawyer's job better than any other. Reserved by nature, she was not originally what you would call a maverick, but the obstacles she encountered as a woman pursuing a career was unjust, male-dominated field, and a society turned her into one. During her law school years, she was the first woman ever on both the Harvard Law Review and Columbia Law Review. In 1972, after successfully suing the university that she worked at for discrimination against women, she became Columbia University's first law school tenure female law professor. The same year, she was appointed the co-founder and director of ACLU Women's Rights Project, becoming one of the most prominent promoters of women's rights in the 1970s, an era of women's rights advancements for which she was in a large part responsible. During her years with the ACLU, she furthered the notion of equal protection for women and men under the law, and participated in 34 Supreme Court cases, winning 5 of the 6 cases that she herself argued before the Supreme Court as lead or co-counsel. In each of the 34 cases she oversaw, she used logic that inequality between men and women hurts both men and women. She fought against stereotyping men or women because of their gender. In certain cases, she defended a man's right not to be stereotyped or denied certain rights or privilege due to his gender. It was a brilliant way of promoting the cause of equal rights. After her groundbreaking work as a lawyer, she became appointed the U.S. Court of Appeals in 1980. She was one of the record-breaking 40 female appointments to the federal bench made by President Jimmy Carter. When he took office in 1977, there was only one female federal judge, and there was 96 men in America. Out of 399 district court judges, only 5 were women. In 1993, Ruth became the first Jewish woman and only the second woman in history to be appointed as the Justice of Supreme Court, where she was still serving when this book was written, but as of Friday has recently passed away. As the Supreme Court Justice, she had designated herself through strongly worded dissents, most notably in the case of Bush versus Gore, Shelby versus Holder, and Burwell versus Hobby Lobby, and she made her mark as the most politically liberal member of the court in many regards. Through her votes as a justice, she continued her advocacy for women's rights, and she also voted in rights favoring African Americans, affirming action to help combat discrimination against African American students, criminal background checks for people who wanted to buy a gun, and the right for gay couples to marry. Her opposition to the Citizens United versus the FEC decision, by which a majority of the Supreme Court determined that corporations are people, therefore are privileged to the right of freedom of speech. It was a very famous one. She was called the most disappointing Supreme Court decision during her time on the court. She was known as a firebrand, has inspired young generation of equal rights and social justice advocates. Even though she has become a bit of a rock star, her image has been on t-shirts with Notorious RBG, a reference to the hip-hop artist Notorious B.I.G. Ruth loves every minute of it, and so do her granddaughters. At age 84, RBG shows no signs of slowing down. She still does her Canadian Air Force exercises every morning. She still writes her written responses in whichever case at a faster rate than her younger colleagues. And when asked how many women on the Supreme Court would be enough, she responds, when there are all 9. So that is the story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Like I said, she was a huge part of our history, and I hope that you can see why she is so important. And I hope that you got to learn a little bit more about her.